Well, hello everybody. It's Scott from Optrics along with Sean Sturby, our technical services manager. This is another edition of the Optrics Insider. Hope you are all keeping well. So we have our 3 topics plus a bonus. The first one is FireEye updates on the SolarWinds attack. The second one is Flash is dead, but it sounds like Extreme Networks didn't get the memo. DNSpooq is a new trending name and logo. And finally, SonicWall joins FireEye, Microsoft, and MalwareBytes, but it's not necessarily a good thing. All right, Sean, let's start with FireEye's update on the SolarWinds attack.
Yeah, so we've been getting a lot of good information from FireEye about that supply chain attack that they've been investigating. And so what they did recently was 2 interesting things. One, they released a white paper. It's 39 pages long, and it's specifically on strategies to harden anybody who has Microsoft 365 to defend against the attacks that got into SolarWinds. So it's a good read for anybody who has Azure Active Directory, being proactive and making harder for the next attack. So that's the first thing they did. The second, they've released a free script. It's up on GitHub, and it's going to look for indicators of compromise, or IOCs. It's actually looking for high fidelity indicators and dual use indicators. So what's the difference there? High fidelity, yes, you likely have been exploited by this similar attack behind the SolarWinds supply chain attack. Dual use, there's an indicator that says maybe you should be hardened or a little set up your environment a little harder. Please look into the results further. It might be a false positive.
So it definitely sounds like it's worth reading.
The white paper and the script are both worth reading if you are in Microsoft 365 or Azure AD.
Which I would imagine a lot of people are. Okay, excellent. And we'll include, as we always do, links to those articles and in the show notes. So excellent. Okay. Let's talk about Flash. So Flash is dead, but Extreme Networks didn't get the memo. What happened there?
Yeah. So for everybody who doesn't know, Adobe Flash is a technology to have very rich web pages. So anything that you go to that has a lot of animations or games or streaming media or videos, quite often the technology behind it is Flash. Now, Flash has historically been abused. So Adobe came along and said, with all of the advances in the other web technologies like HTML5, Flash is redundant and it's hard to support, so we're not going to support it anymore. It is going to go end of life in 3 years. Well, that 3 years has come up and gone. It was January 11th, 2021. And so everybody in the industry was aware of that. And at that point, Flash just does not work. There's workarounds, but unfortunately, because it had a good technology for making very rich interfaces, a lot of companies, and Extreme Networks is just one, there are others, that used Flash behind the scenes to make the interface that they use to manage their devices very beautiful, very picturesque. Unfortunately, Extreme Networks, while busy and working on creating a replacement, missed the deadline. And so people were complaining that, hey, I'm trying to change something on my network and I can't because the tool does not work.
Whoops.
So always have a second way of managing things. I know Cisco had a web interface for a while, but you could always get in via the command line. Fortinet's the same. There's always multiple ways of doing things. Don't rely on one technology that could go end of life like Flash.
Yeah, wow. Interesting. Okay. Now let's talk about DNSpooq, which is a new trendy name and logo.
Yeah. So JSOF Tech, they disclosed this. They put up a logo and this name, DNSpooq. They talk about it, and I'll explain it a little later. It was discovered in September of 2020 and finally disclosed January 19th, 2021. What it is it's vulnerabilities found in a piece of software called DNSmask, DNSmasq. That's an open source DNS forwarding software in common use. The JSOF company actually found that there were 1 million DNSmask servers that were visible on the internet. So the impact could be quite big.
Hmm.
Now, what is DNS and why is this important? DNS is the domain name system that's behind the internet. When you look up something, I want to go to my video streaming site, I want to go and search for something on Google. DNS is behind the scenes looking it up. You type in, I want to go to Google, and DNS says, oh, Google is over here. It's like the phone book for the internet. Well, many devices, including things like home routers, can include this DNSmask software. So when you look up something, they retain a local copy of that so that you want to go to that same site again. Well, the lookups are quicker because you have a local copy in your cache. The disclosure mentioned 40 specific vendors, although there are probably more. And they mentioned things like Cisco, Comcast, Google for Android, if you have an Android cell phone, Netgear, Red Hat, Ubiquiti, and all the major Linux distributions. I have a personal interest because of something called Pi-hole. So they have this vulnerable software that was all fixed in DNSmask 2.83, but the flaw did two things. It would allow wrong or spoofed information to be added to your local DNS cache. So what's the impact of that? Well, imagine you need to go and search for something. So you want to go to Google. However, your local copy of the DNS information has been flooded with false information. So when you go to Google, or what you think is Google, what you actually get is a lookalike site. And when you search for anything on that lookalike site, the only response it returns is a very catchy Rick Astley video.
You're Rickrolled, are you?
Yeah, it would be a major Rickroll. Now that one's a funny example, but
Sure.
it could be a much more serious. I need to update some critical software, like on my Solarwinds server, and now you get what you looks like or is a lookalike Solarwinds download site, but in reality, you've gone off to a malware author's lookalike site, and what you think you're downloading a clean version of the software to get rid of a vulnerability actually already includes another vulnerability or another backdoor Trojan horse.
So, okay, a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Recently in the news, they showed that the Antifa site redirected to the White House,
Mm-hmm.
which of course created all sorts of theories, I'm sure. But would this be an example of what you were just talking about?
In that specific case, no. The Antifa site was just being redirected to various different URLs. The webmaster for that site was doing that deliberately. This would be somebody not affiliated with the site is injecting incorrect answers to try and get you to go to the wrong place.
Okay, so the Antifa redirect was just deliberate from the sounds of it, whereas what you're talking about is a malware kind of messing with the records to get you to go somewhere that you think you are, like you think you're going to your banking site and legit, when in fact it's a hacked site.
Correct, yes. And so DNSpooq is a merge of three elements: DNS spoofing, the idea of a spook spying on the internet traffic, and the Q at the end of DNSmask replacing the K in spook. And then the graphic or the logo was a spy or spook looking at the internet traffic, but through tainted or altered glasses and giving you an altered perception of what is out there on the internet.
Ah.
So get your updates. I mentioned Pi-hole. Pi-hole is a wonderful, very lightweight system that you can install so that it caches local results on your home network, but it also allows you to say, here's a whole list of sites I don't want to go to, or I don't want anyone to go to. Make sure that they're all blocked. So behind the scenes, it's using that same DNS mask software. And the people that are doing DNS mask and Pi-hole were involved with JSOF to do the update and make sure that the DNS mask software was properly secured.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. When you were talking about that, you reminded me of something, and then I lost it. I'll have to write it down, and maybe ask you at the end if it comes to mind. But interesting. All right, so let's talk about our bonus, which is SonicWall joins FireEye, Microsoft, and MalwareBytes. So what do all these organizations have in common, Sean?
They join a group, 4 security vendors that are disclosing that they had a security breach over the past 2 months. So SonicWall recently released a notice, it's on their website, that said they were compromised by a coordinated attack by a highly sophisticated threat actor exploiting a possible zero-day vulnerability on the SonicWall secure remote access products. They mentioned specifically, NetExtender VPN client and the secure mobile access, and they put in all of the product numbers. They have since updated it to January 23rd. The NetExtender VPN client and the SMA 1000 series products are not affected, but there are a lot of them that are. So get your updates and keep on top of it.
That's a good point. I remember what it was that I wanted to bring up. Actually, it was a comment or an observation. Going back to when you're talking about DNS and DNSpooq, it's worth knowing that, especially if there's if you get an email that you're not 100% sure of, that looks like it comes from your bank, but you're not 100% sure, you can usually hover over the link, don't click it, and it'll display what the link is. So if it says it's going to say TD Canada Trust or Bank of America or wherever you bank, and you know that it should go to a specific URL. But if it says a string of something that looks similar, that doesn't make sense, don't click on it. But if you are going to a URL, it's worth looking in the browser to see where you are. If it's like just IP address or something that doesn't make sense, then your chances are you aren't there. One thing that we're also seeing quite a bit of as an IT vendor are emails from education institutes and different larger organizations. And usually what tips us off is they're looking for Cisco gear or hard drives or something easy to pawn, I guess you can say. And so what will often happen is they'll they'll find out the contact details for the main purchaser for that university, and then they'll buy a domain name that it looks similar to but isn't the actual domain name. And I know you're good at catching those, saying this isn't legit. And I know I've actually spoken to some of these purchasers who it's just tremendously bad for them, because they might have purchase orders issued in their names to these other people posing as them. So when you get orders that you aren't expecting, if you're in a similar vendor of some sort, just pay attention to that. I know our local university got hit by it, and I was helping track them, forward information so that they could help track it down. But anyways, your comment on DNSpooq just reminded me of that. So check the URLs of the website, and just if it seems fishy, chances are it is. Okay. Any other comments before we close this off, Sean?
On the idea of hovering over a link, you can hover over it, and quite often you can copy the link, so you're not actually going there, and then you can go to a third-party site like VirusTotal,
right,
and paste that URL in on the VirusTotal site and get it to analyze it and come back. And quite often it'll come back and say, yeah, it's a known phishing email or known phishing site or known malware, or yeah, it's loaded with Trojan horses, stay away.
Right. Yeah. So and that's a free tool as well, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
VirusTotal. Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Sean. Our 4 topics today were FireEye update on the SolarWinds attack, and they have a really good tool code that you can use.
Paper.
Code and white paper. Flash is dead, but unfortunately, Extreme Networks. Well, they got the memo, but they were just late on their deadline to update.
And they're not alone.
Yes, DNS spook, I should say, and their DNS causing DNS issues. And finally, as a bonus, SonicWall joins FireEye, Microsoft, and MalwareBytes on the list of people who had a bit of a breach. So not good. But thank you very much for your time, Sean. And as always, if you enjoyed today's content, like, share, and subscribe. We also have this as a podcast too on Spotify. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Right.